6. I guess I could have entitled this class Litigation and Ladies of the Evening, but I actually took the title from the source that I'm using, which is Gordon Fee, on litigation and going to prostitutes, which is very similar to that, litigation and ladies of the evening, I suppose. There is an overview of the lesson there, and that's just, the overview is an abbreviation. It's an abbreviation of what I had in there last week, and it was summing up the two sections. In chapter 5, he deals with the man who is having a relationship with his father's wife, and Paul's concern was that the church was proud of it, and so as a result, he commanded them to withdraw their fellowship from that gentleman. So that was basically last week. This week in chapter 6, he takes up the problem of taking a brother or sister to court, and then he's going to talk about immorality and frequenting, what amount to frequenting prostitutes in chapter 6. You can read basically the summary of these various sections on here. I may go back and take a look at some of that or bring up a thought or two at another occasion. But let's just go ahead and get into the text itself, which would be chapter 6, 1 through, chapter 6, 1 through 11. If any of you has a dispute with another, dare he take it before the ungodly for judgment instead of before the saints. What is he talking about there? Going to civil court instead of taking something to the believers. Now, what are the parameters? Because as we ask the question later, what application does this passage have for us today? We need to think about the particulars. Who is this? Who is he talking to, and what is the issue here? Yes, it's the very last one. Lesson 10. Who is he talking to, and what is the issue here? He's talking to, yes, sir? The Corinthian church. So this is a problem within the church itself. So apparently there are two brothers within the church itself that have some sort of dispute, most likely some kind of property or money dispute, because later Paul is going to use the word, well, you should just go ahead and decide you're going to be defrauded instead of taking this before a civil court. What is the issue of taking a civil matter? I mean, a matter between two brothers into the civil court. Yes, go ahead.
Rather than going to detail, because today we have case laws as opposed to God's law when we go to them.
Mm-hmm.
So that creates problems because you're using worldly wisdom as opposed to God's wisdom.
Okay, yeah, that would certainly be the case. But who would they be going before in court? Well, no, you're right. Who would they be going before in Corinth.
Did they have elected officials there?
Mm-hmm. Someone else?
I just said whatever the government for that area is, the police, whatever.
Well, most likely they would be unbelievers, so they would be pagans, so they would be coming from a totally different value system than you. And you mentioned that right there. Man's wisdom instead of God's wisdom would be one of the first things that would be on their mind. So Paul is really concerned. But let's back up just a notch. You have two brothers that are on the outs with each other. Now already you have a problem there, right? And if it does have to do with financing or property or money, then immediately you see that you have two brothers in the church that are not in a state they need to be in. Go ahead.
I always like to refer those types of things to Matthew 18:15.
Uh-huh.
So if you have a problem with your brother, you go to them privately. We've had a problem in this church a long time ago with gossip.
Uh-huh.
And it just spreads around and creates all sorts of. But if you have a problem with your brother, you're supposed to go to them first.
Go to your brother first. That's correct, rather than gossiping about them. So immediately we have an issue here, because you have a problem within the church between two brothers, and so he says, "How dare you take it before the ungodly for judgment instead of before the saints? Do you not know that the saints will judge the world? And if you are to judge the world, are you not competent to judge trivial cases? Do you not know that we will judge angels?" What is he saying there? Yes, sir.
When we get to heaven, we're going to be judging angels.
Well, that certainly appears to be what he's saying, that in the end, the Bible speaks of us being placed here to do God's will. We were put here in the garden to be his hands and his feet. We were to be his image bearers in the world. Sin kind of put an end to that. Nowadays, even when men try to judge the world, there's always going to be the element of sin, abuse, or something like that involved in it. I mean, that's just pretty much the case. So the Bible speaks of a time when God is going to establish his kingdom, and his will is going to be done on earth as it is in heaven. The book of Revelation, and this is my interpretation. Some of you, if you disagree, you can take it up with me later. The book of Revelation speaks of that last final day in which we will not go to be with God as much as God will come to be with us. That's kind of the final picture. And what we see in those last couple of chapters of Revelation is a return to Eden. Yes, sir.
That's why the Lord's Prayer is so important.
Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And we're to pray for that. So we're to pray for God's rule upon the earth. So, the Bible makes it very clear that just as Adam and Eve were given the job to reign and rule as God's, I prefer the word vice-regent instead of co-regent. God is the king of the world, and God gave Adam and Eve the ability to judge and to rule and to reign in God's absence, but God is still the one that's in charge. And the picture that is given of saints, I would say even throughout the Bible, but especially there in those last 2 chapters of Revelation, is that we are going to reign with Christ. We will reign in His kingdom with Christ. And it will be a matter in which the righteousness of God will always be done. I believe that Paul is referring to this when he said that we will judge angels. And what was the other word that he said there? We will judge the world. So I think, now it may be something in terms of the judgment day. I mean, what angels are going to need to be judged? Pardon? The devil's angels, or the fallen angels, or the ones who have decided to be against. So that sounds very much like it would be kind of an end time kind of thing that's going to take place. But it also says we are going to judge the world. I'm not so sure if he is saying that we will be a part of a final judgment, so to speak, when it comes to the world, as much as he's saying that we will have responsible places in the kingdom when Jesus comes, and our job will be to rule or to reign with Christ in that matter. That's kind of how I see what he's talking about here. Go ahead.
That's why it's so important for us to do what we're doing right now, is to learn about God through His Word. Because we're more or less in training to do that very thing when we get to heaven.
That's very good. Interesting. N.T. Wright has a book that I'm trying to think of the name of it, because the British version of it and the English version of it has a different name. But the idea is, why are we Christians here on earth now? I mean, have you ever wondered that? Why didn't God just go ahead when you were saved and, take you home? Why didn't He do that? It's like I said, why didn't the preacher just hold you down for another 5 minutes when he was baptizing you? That way, you got the fast track into your eternal reward when you do that. Well, God has something for us to do here. And we are to live out kingdom values now. So what we need to think of is, how is it going to be in God's kingdom? And how can I live like that now? Yes, sir.
That's why I like the acronym for Bible. Basic instructions before leaving earth.
That's right. Basically, Wright in his book tells us, and we use a passage in Revelation like, "Blessed are the dead that die in the Lord from henceforth, for they will rest from their labors, for their works do follow them." So see, what you do now is building toward what you will be doing in the kingdom. I also think that's why Jesus says to those, much is given, much is going to be required, but that the more you do, basically, I'm not talking about works-related salvation, but he's basically saying that if we're faithful here, that's a better way of putting it, just use Jesus' words. If we're faithful in little, we will be faithful, we will be given more. We'll be faithful in much. And so I think that has to do with what's going to happen when the heaven and earth merge. And we live, if you want to call it heaven, that's fine. The Bible uses the term new heaven and earth when it describes those things. But God has a plan for His creation, and it's going to exist past the coming of Jesus. But What I said is several lessons worth of material. So I hate to just throw that. It's not like it's a new concept. I've woven this to a number of classes and such, so it's not like it's new material, but I really don't have time to establish that point at this point. But what I want to say is, again, back to N.T. Wright's book, it's kind of like a book for new Christians, his version of a book for new Christians. And it says, our life is to be spent getting ready for that day. Like you said, basic instructions before leaving earth. Our job now is to do that. So we put on these, he uses the word virtues. He even goes back to classical, I guess it's Plato or Aristotelian virtues, and he talks about the difference between Christian virtues and that. They had the idea that that's how you escaped the world, is by becoming a more virtuous person. He says, no, this is preparing you for the world to come. So what we do, and the reason we do such things now is to prepare. So we're to live in the here and now the way that we imagine or are taught that the kingdom of God will be like. That's the reason that we emphasize love in all we do. Because God is love, that's going to be a major hallmark of his kingdom. That's why we are to treat everyone with fairness, equality, and justice. Because those are going to be hallmarks of the kingdom of God. In short, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. That's what we're praying for, and that's what we're working for. So, if we are going to judge the world, if we're going to reign with Christ, if we are going to be responsible for judging angels, if we are living by God's standard of judgment, you may want to talk about the wisdom that is from above in the here and now. If we are to be moral and good people in life, then why are leaders in the church not capable of sorting out these? And Paul, does he use the word trivial? What word does he use? Trivial. That's the word, at least the NIV translate. Are you not competent to judge trivial matters? I told you of a time in our marriage when Tina and I came to an impasse about something in regard to how one of our children were to be raised. She was very adamant, I was very adamant, and there was no getting around it. We were at an impasse. So we went to another couple, older couple. Their children, I guess, were grown. And we just said, look, we have an impasse. I think this way. Tina thinks this way. I would like for you and your wife to go home and pray. Just pray about it. And then come back and tell us what your thoughts are. And whatever you tell us to do, we will do. All right? Pretty good plan, right? I mean, he's going to take my side anyway. I knew that. But he took her side. He took her side. Looking back on it, I think it was right. I think it was probably, I had a blind spot, as I often do. But you see what I'm talking about? That's a concept here. If there is a disagreement between Christians, why can we not go to older and wiser Christians and resolve that? And that's what Paul is saying here. Look, if you're going to judge the world, you need to be able to decide where your kid and when your kid is going to go take a week's visit with grandma. You know? You got to be able to figure that out. Well, that's kind of what we're looking at here. Now, I'll give you another opinion, and not that my stuff isn't just full of opinion anyway from time to time. I believe that's the reason we have elders in the church, or at least one of the reasons elders exist. And are you familiar with the Presbyterian or the Reformed churches? They have a Presbyterian form of government, which means they're governed by elders. By the way, that's why they're called Presbyterian. Presbyter, which is elder. And it is very much practiced in many Reformed churches. I was a member of a Reformed marriage group. Now, this is really cool. This is a Facebook group in which people would write in and they would ask marital questions on just every topic you could imagine. And a lot of them dealt with various disputes that people had. And in the Reformed group, nearly every answer came down to this. There was always someone that came down to this answer. Have you brought it before the elders? He's talking about couples bringing it before the elders and talking to them about what role they should take. In the Old Testament, the elders often served as judges. Remember those sitting at the city gate, or how the elders were to help Moses as he adjudicated matters that people brought to him. And so I think that's at least one of the functions of elders in the New Testament church, is that if there is an issue, here you have older, wiser men who are able to do that. I can tell you in the situation that Tina and I went through, I don't think we ever had one that was ever that serious again that I felt like I had to, take it before an arbiter, just say you decide and we'll do it. I think that's what Paul is talking about. What do you think? I've talked too much now. Yes, ma'am.
One thing that I see that's different between your examples and what's happened here in Scripture is it sounds like those guys, one of them actually had committed what would be considered a crime in the eyes of the law, otherwise there's no point in taking it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if it's a dispute in your marriage or how to get a child, it's not necessarily that anybody has potentially committed a crime.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just wondering if you could speak to, churches have lost a ton of respect to the general population
Mm-hmm.
because of all the sexual abuse cases
Mm-hmm.
that the churches did try to deal with it internally rather than taking it to a court of law. And so that's viewed in general by most people as a cover-up. That's how they see it. So could you maybe speak to or draw some parallels or contrasts to that type of situation?
That is actually a wonderful question. She says, giving with all the abuse cases that are out there today, and oftentimes churches have tried to deal with those internally, and oftentimes they've been covered up. How does that fit in this discussion? Is that kind of what?
Even if they weren't covered up, even if internally they did something about it and they felt they had addressed it, but it was never taken to.
Well, let me say this. Any form of abuse is serious. We have elders, ministers, counselors. We have an obligation that if we know of abuse that is ongoing, to report it, period. There is no, that can be very, nobody wants the church to be known as, hey, that's the place down the road where that guy was abusing some young girl or whatever. We don't want to be known as that. And so everybody wants to handle it hush-hush, and let's see if we can't do this internally. This is a crime. This is a crime. Now, I think the church should initiate handling it. If I knew about it, the first thing that I would do is I would go and tell the elders and say, okay, this is a situation that I'm seeing here. First of all, do you agree that this is a case of abuse, or do you agree that this is a case where someone is being mistreated? And if that is the case, Indeed, I mean, you want as a Christian to make sure your facts are correct before you proceed. And that's the reason I would suggest the intermediate step. But I think the way the church should deal with it would be through the legal means. Mm-hmm. She says we're required to follow the law of the land. And that is the law of the land. But I mean, even just besides that, this is something that doesn't need to happen. Sometimes couples will come to me. There is physical abuse between the husband or the wife, either the husband or the wife. And I tell you don't have to stay in that situation. And that's not just legal. That's just that you don't have to stay in that situation. I don't care if you're both Christians. You don't stay in a situation where you were being abused, sexually or otherwise. You just don't have to do that. God is not calling us to that kind of thing. And those of us in the leadership of the church need, in my opinion, we need to act. And in this particular case, it's not about what people will think. It's about how we can protect the person who is allegedly, and I only say that word, not to cast doubt on it, we need to protect the person that's being abused, and we should err on the side of caution. That means not allowing this person to be abused than something else. But there needs to be an investigation, and I think, my opinion is, that is beyond the scope and purview of the church to take care of. Anyone disagree with me? And that's okay if you do. Go ahead, Tia. Mm-hmm. 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 Mm-hmm.
And yet we all have this little wrestling match happening because if we're to honor our father and our mother, we end up with split alliances.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do we start to appreciate the day and the night, the cold and the hot, and say, this is how we maintain balance, this is how we keep the house, is that, half the year we let the men have it the temperature they want, half the year we let the women have it the temperature they want, and half the day we let the men handle how they want, half the day we let the women handle it how they want. I don't know how to resolve the blame game except to finally start to say, what's wrong with the world? I am. Right? Is that the issue? That the big almighty me is the problem with the world, and until we say, God, I surrender. This American pride of God gets chopped down to size. Have your way with us. And stop running, stop hiding, stop fighting, and say, here's my white flag surrender.
I don't know if I can summarize all of that. No, I just don't know. My mind is too small to remember everything. But toward the end, especially, you said, is the problem, and I took it as a rhetorical question, is the problem me? And I would say in many cases, if I'm understanding, yes, it is. The problem is with me. There are, especially within family conflicts, such as what I described earlier about the kid and grandma and Tina and I having a different approach to that issue, and literally there was probably no right answer to that issue. It's what I wanted versus what she wanted, or versus what grandma wanted. In looking at that, so in that real sense, that conflict was caused by selfishness within me. As we look at other family conflicts that there are, sometimes, especially in regard to the illustration I gave, sexual abuse or actual physical abuse, I think there are mitigating factors that could affect both the abuser and the abused. But I would say universally, we would probably come down on the side of the abused, that this kind of thing should not happen in homes. Like I said, there may be mitigating factors. If you look at blame there, and I want to be very careful as I said this, there may be some difficulty on both sides of the issue. And in regard to this relationship you had mentioned at the very beginning, about our relationship with God, I think there is, I think spiritual abuse is very much a thing. And I think there are toxic churches, and I think there are toxic doctrines that are believed by people. And I think that is the thing that leads us to the ambivalence that we might have toward God. Is he good or is he not? Because we have learned God from imperfect people, and sometimes we have been guilty of that spiritual abuse itself. Yes?
The last 150, 200 years, our whole society has been falling apart, basically because the family, which is the basis of all civilization, has deteriorated so badly that nobody really knows what the right answer is.
Well, yeah, and I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop culturally, even with things like abuse. I mean, for so long, the feminist approach was girls need equal opportunity in sports as do men, as men have. They need to have that same. But then today, we find with transgenderism and such as that it seems that women again are getting the lousy end of the stick when it comes to that particular topic. So, who knows what the mores of society will say even regard. There are some people that even, there's, what is it, NAMDA, the National Association of Man-Boy Love, that basically is pedophilia masquerading as something that's supposed to be good. And that has certainly crossed that line societally, something that most everyone would still say is wrong. Yeah, you have some. No, that's fine. I'm way off track. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And there are things that essentially they are crimes. You are required to work within the legal system. And I also think there's a lot of more what we would think of as civil court cases. Maybe I hit your car in the parking lot, and you think it's my fault and I should pay, and I think it's your fault and you should pay, and you get a big old fuss over that.
Mm-hmm.
We are not required to take that to court, but we can.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that you're talking about cases where it's something more like that, where people are fighting over something where they both think they're in the right and the other is in the wrong,
Mm-hmm.
and they choose to air their dirty laundry in front of the pagan courts rather than go to the wise
Right.
people in their church over, and solve this.
Laura, let me just go ahead and summarize so far. Laura has said that she thinks this is not really immediately addressing, say, something like we've said about abuse, or maybe something like a disagreement between my wife and I about where the kids go, for a week or two, but rather where there's actually been some sort of defrauding that has gone on. Someone has taken something that belongs to someone else. She even mentioned the illustration, someone's car was hit. That happened to us at the last church. There was a lady that didn't even know it. Seriously, didn't even know it. Just right down the side of our car when she was pulling in the parking lot at church, and big old long messed up. Didn't know it, but when she found out about it, she was horrified. Immediately stepped in, immediately took care of it. So maybe if we use that illustration, if that kind of thing happened to me in church, and let's say that woman refused to acknowledge that she did it, I think Paul is saying rather than take that to a civil court, I should have just taken care of it myself. Would you agree with that, or?
Or at least, go in front of others, kind of like you said before, an arbiter, hey, we're going to fight.
Okay, yeah. In that case, it might be the elders of the church or something if she didn't agree to that. But I think that's really what Paul is saying here. He's saying rather than take your brother to court, you need to either decide you're just going to take the loss, or you need to take it before the church and let the church decide between you. Because we don't need this standing up before a court of law and yeah about this or that, us being believers and them being unbelievers. That is a bad look for the church, something that we should avoid. Yes, ma'am.
And that the Lord is number one in my life. First and only love. And also that it's an evil world, that there are spiritual forces, even Paul said in the Bible, I fought the good fight. It is a fight here. It is a fight here. But in my mind, if I have the Bible in my mind, and I see certain things, then I know already how I'm supposed to respond because I've read the Bible and love the Lord. Because we're just passing through here. We're just passing through here. And then we have to stand in front of the Lord and show our life.
Jerry has said that as a Christian, she sees that the purpose of her life is to follow God, do whatever He says. And so she feels that she has an obligation to learn, know, and then apply that into whatever situations that I would happen in life. Therefore, if something like this happened, whether it be someone running into your car, a brother or sister or something like that, you would know how you were supposed to behave. And certainly the Corinthians should have known how they were to behave. But Paul has already told them that they were fleshly, they were carnal, the old word for that. They were very selfishly oriented toward various things, and they needed to be reminded that this is just not something that you do to get ahead at all cost. Yes, sir.
Well, and that goes back to the golden rule, kind of echo what Jerry was saying. Do unto others, you have them do to you.
A lot of good. Well, one of the reasons I was trying to give some of these sideline examples is to ask ourselves the question, how do we apply this today? Because, I mean, there are obvious situations where some things happen legally. I don't want to say if they're necessarily out of our control, but let's say that same situation happened between me and the woman. And my insurance company was not happy with her insurance company, how they did that. Would it then be wrong for my insurance company to sue her insurance company? You see what I'm saying? And what I was trying to do is establish some sort. But the more I look at it, I think this is a principle, is that as Christians, if we have disputes between each other, we need to handle them between each other. We don't need to take our affairs before a pagan society when we have people who are capable of arbitrating our differences within the church. Now, there is a really good 2/3 more to this lesson that I don't want to just gloss over or tell you to read your study sheet, okay? So let's go next week, and we'll come back. We'll look at what he has to say. We'll cover the second half of this, because what he's going to say is, you, the offended party, should have just decided to be defrauded. And then he will say, you, the offending party, need to realize that there are certain things that will keep you out of the kingdom of God. And you need to make sure that your life is right. And then he'll talk more about immorality at the end of the chapter. So that's next week. Thank you for your time. So, yeah, keep your study sheets, but there are plenty back there, I think. Hey, by the way,